My name is Michelle Chitando. I'm a legal officer and I lead the Climate Change and Energy Program at the Zimbabwe Environmental Law Organization, or ZELO for short. The Climate Change Management Bill is something that has been a long time coming, considering there's need to tie in all the national efforts around climate change. What we've seen before this bill was a lot of policies related to issues of climate change, the National Climate Change Response Strategy, the National Climate Policy. We've got the Constitution of Zimbabwe, which clearly speaks about environmental rights. But all these, including the policies, needed to be tied in together, which is coming in through this climate change bill. It is a very critical development because it will help coordinate the efforts of the different stakeholders that are dealing with issues of climate change. So in these processes, we are grateful that the process has been very encompassing. It has been allowing stakeholders to bring in their different perspectives, which is something that is very crucial, especially when we look at climate change issues. We need public participation. We need the different stakeholders, and especially the vulnerable groups' voices to be heard, especially when we're trying to come up with solutions around climate change mitigation and climate change adaptation.
So in your presentation, you mentioned that the EMA Act might need to be updated. Maybe if you can just give us a highlight of some of the sections, the issues that you think are addressed.
The Environmental Management Act provides for what is called an environmental impact assessment, which is mandatory for projects that might impact the environment. So the Climate Change Management Bill brings in a perspective that the Climate Change Department would have to work with other departments related to projects, policies, anything related to the environment, such that the environmental impact assessment process considers climate processes. So from this perspective, for us to align the two, it means we'd need to amend the environmental impact assessment, one, to expand the scope around climate change aspects, but also around the other issues that have already been highlighted around social issues, how communities are impacted. Whilst it's not just the environment, it needs to encompass social aspects as well as climate aspects.
And to what extent does the bill speak to the protection of the vulnerable communities, including smallholder farmers, women, youth, rural communities?
The bill is quite clear. It speaks about the different stakeholders that are impacted by climate change, and it also makes reference to vulnerable groups around gender aspects and all the other that may not have been spelled out, but these need to be considered in terms of climate planning, around mitigation aspects, around adaptation aspects. Whilst we see the climate change management bill coming in, it's coming in to complement existing laws. So there are already other policies, but what we like about the climate change bill is that it's coming to tie in everything together. Complementary, but also not working against what already has been existing.
And in terms of crafting the bill, the private sector, was it involved? Did you give your input?
The private sector was involved from a perspective that the consultations were open to everyone in terms of public hearings, in terms of the constitutional laws. They allow anybody who's interested to bring in their perspectives. So the private sector, I'm sure, was part of these processes, was also consulted, and there's still an opportunity to bring in what they would want to see within the bill. Should they come up with other ideas or should any developments happen, the opportunity is still there for them to contribute to the climate change management bill development processes.
Are there any issues that you feel are under-addressed in the bill?
Currently, the bill is quite comprehensive in terms of holistically addressing the issues related to climate change, but there would be need for there to be a clear definition of the just transition. The just transition is mentioned in the objectives, but as we know, this is a principle and a process that is happening globally. But from a global perspective, the contexts differ from country to country. So this brings an opportunity for Zimbabwe to come up with what it defines as its just transition and what processes it needs to do around that. That is context specific and also economic specific, looking at our developmental needs and how we're going to achieve a climate resilient society.
And you have made several recommendations. Do you think think they're going to be taken on board?
We hope they'll be taken on board, considering the bill is still at a process where it's still being developed. There's still opportunities for amendments to be made before the bill is finally passed into a law.